Shrimp on your plate, prices at the store, and a trade war brewing on the horizon. Today, Louisiana's shrimpers are begging Congress for help, India's trade minister is flying to Washington to push back, and major retailers from Walmart to Ford are raising prices. Again. At the end of the line, it's the working class, both in the U.S. and abroad, who pay the price. You're watching Roughcut Media Network. I'm Lee Calvin, and this is Roughly Speaking. Welcome back to Roughly Speaking, the show that peels back the headlines and looks at how economics, politics, and power really hit working people. And today's story has 3 acts. We'll start in Louisiana, where shrimpers are fighting for survival against a flood of cheap imports. Then we'll jump to Washington, where India's top trade minister is about to sit down with American officials in a showdown over tariffs. And finally, we'll end where it always ends, at the cash register, where regular folks are already paying more for sneakers, screws, and shrimp. This is a story about global trade, sure. But more than that, it's a story about kitchen tables, family budgets, and the unseen tax of tariffs. To be completely honest, I chose this story because shrimps are one of my all-time favorite foods, so this tariff probably hits my wallet more than it would for most folks, but I digress. Down on the Gulf, shrimping is more than a job. It's a heritage. Families in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama have been pulling shrimp out of the water for generations. But the industry has been on the ropes for years. Imports, especially from India, now dominate the U.S. market, making up well over a third of all shrimp we eat. And those imports are cheap. Too cheap for American boats to compete. That's why 2 senators just introduced the India Shrimp Tariff Act. Their pitch is simple. Level the playing field by making Indian shrimp more expensive so U.S. shrimpers can get a fair price at the dock. But let's talk about the working class here. A deckhand on a shrimp boat doesn't make Wall Street money. We're talking $20,000 to $30,000 a season, often with no health care and long, dangerous hours on the water. ZipRecruiter shows an hourly average pay of about $21.58. When dock prices crash because imports flood the market, that paycheck shrinks even further because wages are often tied directly to the price they get for the shrimps. Boats don't go out, hours get cut, and in some towns, the entire economy suffers. For these families, tariffs could mean the difference between keeping the boat afloat or parking it for good. Now, the indirect effect. If tariffs raise shrimp prices, every restaurant and grocery store has to pass those costs on. That means a family splurge on a shrimp boil suddenly costs 20% more. For middle-class households, that's an annoyance. But for the working-class folks already stretched thin, it's one more reason to skip a night out or cut back at the grocery store. Tariffs might save a shrimping job in Houma, Louisiana, but they take dollars out of wallets in Omaha, Nebraska. And there's another layer. Imports are often cheaper because they're produced under weaker labor and environmental standards. So on one hand, tariffs can push back against unfair competition. On the other hand, they can also spark retaliation, leading to a spiral that hurts more industries than it saves and leans on the working class to pay the tax. On September 22nd, India's Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal, will land in Washington. His mission? Fight back against the tidal wave of American tariffs, including the new shrimp duties. For Indian shrimp farmers, these tariffs aren't abstract. In Andhra Pradesh, one of India's shrimp hubs, farmers are already seeing the price they get cut by about 20%. That's devastating in a region where many are deep in debt, relying on loans to keep their ponds running. Some are already talking about abandoning shrimp altogether. Go ahead and roll tape.
USA is the biggest market for Indian seafood exports, especially shrimp. So, the 50% tariffs effective from the 27th of August puts this industry in a fragile position. CNBC TV 18 Santya Gora reports that exporters, aquaculturists and fishermen are hoping that the government will come to their rescue, without which crores of livelihoods will be destroyed.
This is Sassoon Dock, Maharashtra's seafood hub. It's buzzing with fishing boats offloading the day's catch and tons of seafood being processed for market. It's an over 6-decade-old industry with stakeholders having worked here for generations. But these people now fear their way of life will soon come to an end. They blame this man, American President Donald Trump. Till the beginning of August 2025, frozen seafoods exports to USA attracted a duty of 10%. But President Trump raised this first to 25% and then to 50%. Exporters say this high tariff will kill what has been a lucrative business.
90% of exporters will face the brunt who are doing, because most of them, these farmed aquaculture products, 90% goes to the US. US and China are the major markets.
In India's textile sector, it's the same story on a bigger scale. Tens of millions of workers, many of them women in rural villages, depend on exports to the U.S. When tariff hits, orders drop, wages fall, and layoffs ripple through communities that can't afford them. But here's where the indirect impact circles back to America. India has leverage too. They've retaliated before with tariffs on U.S. almonds, apples, and whiskey. So while Louisiana shrimpers might feel protected, California farmers, Midwestern apple growers, and Kentucky distillers could find themselves getting squeezed. For U.S. workers in those industries, a tariff that's supposed to help working families in the Gulf could end up killing jobs thousands of miles away. And for consumers, retaliation means less choice and higher prices. That's how a trade war works. Each side escalates, and in the end, regular people are the ones left standing in the wreckage. And that brings us to where every policy eventually lands, the checkout line. Companies like Walmart, Adidas, Home Depot, and Ford aren't waiting around. They're already raising prices and pointing squarely at tariffs. Adidas says sneaker costs are climbing, Home Depot says hardware prices are up, and Ford warns of higher sticker prices on cars. For the working class, these aren't just numbers. At Walmart, where millions of families stretch every paycheck, even a 5% hike on basics, shoes, clothing, kitchen goods, means fewer dollars for groceries or gas. At Home Depot, the price of paint or plumbing parts ticks up, and suddenly that DIY project costs more than you budgeted. At Ford, tariffs on imported cars push car payments higher, making it harder for families to buy reliable transportation. And of course, shrimp itself. I'm telling you, I will talk about shrimps all day long. Tariffs might keep Gulf boats running, but that frozen bag at the grocery store isn't staying $9.99. It's climbing to $12.99 or possibly even higher. Restaurants will raise prices too, which means fewer families ordering shrimp platters or seafood boils, not that we could have afforded them anyways. The indirect hit is inflation. Tariffs are basically a hidden tax, not collected by the IRS, but by every retailer who has to raise prices just to stay afloat. And here's the ugly truth. Working class families spend a bigger share of their income on essentials, so they feel that tax harder than anyone else. CEOs aren't cutting back on fancy dinners because shrimp went up $3. But a single mom working 2 jobs, she notices when shoes cost $10 more or the family grocery bill jumps $20. So let's tie it all together. Tariffs on Indian shrimp may keep Louisiana boats in business, but they'll raise prices for American diners and shoppers. India's retaliation could hammer U.S. farmers and exporters, while Indian workers lose jobs and wages. And across America, retailers are already raising prices on goods that working families can't do without. The direct impact: shrimpers get some relief, farmers in India lose orders, consumers in the U.S. pay more. The direct impact: other American industries face retaliation, inflation ticks up, budgets get tighter, and the global economy gets shakier. It's a vicious cycle where people in the boardrooms and government offices keep playing chess while the U.S. working class are being used as the pawns. Tariffs are sold as a way to protect jobs, but in practice, they often function like a tax that ordinary people pay. They might save that boat in Louisiana, but they'll make sneaker prices higher in Ohio. They might punish shrimp farms in Andhra Pradesh, but they'll also make shrimp cocktail cost $5 more in Nebraska. The question we should be asking is this: are tariffs really the best tool to protect workers, or are they just another way to pass the cost of global trade down to the people who can least afford them? That's it for today's Roughly Speaking. I'm Lee Calvin. If you like what you heard, hit subscribe, share it with a friend, or check out more of our shows on Roughcut Media Network. More boots, less suits. We'll see you next time.